Well, there's no shortage of things to talk about today with a budget yesterday and an omnibus bill and lots of things to unpackage in all of it, including, of course, we'll talk about the budget in just a moment with the finance minister who's on hold, so I won't spend a whole lot of time in the preamble. I want to maximize the time with the minister. But a pay raise of nearly 30% for MLAs, and this is something that I'm going to ask you to weigh in on when we open the phone lines. For your calls between noon and 1, also, Nova Scotia government bill would lift ban on fracking and uranium exploration. And this is quite an about-face, the Premier's message is basically this. It could be done safely here, and it's time for us to be adults about this. And he's recently said it's time to take the no out of Nova Scotia, and says that with the challenging fiscal times that we're entering and the uncharted territory of what's happening with the United States, that this is necessary. So, again, some things that we can talk about when we open the phone lines. And, of course, we can talk some hockey as well. I made a comment, it was off the cuff yesterday, about Sidney Crosby, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. I guess a form of an apology about... a minor apology, what I said about Sid. I wasn't critical about Sidney Crosby, but I did say that perhaps he wasn't the best player on the team at this point of his career, but it appears as though I'm wrong. That's right, folks, because Sidney Crosby is leading the tournament in scoring, and upon reflection, I think that I probably misspoke. Imagine that. I'm on an apology tour as of late, but I'll talk more about that later in the show. So thanks for tuning in and listening. Vanessa Vandeness is back behind the glass, doing a fine job, as always. Now, as mentioned, let's talk budget. Time to get into it with John Lohr, the finance minister. Minister Lohr, I know you're very busy. Thanks for carving out some time for us today. We appreciate it.
Well, Todd, it's great to be on your program, and I know you have a lot of listeners, so it's a great way to communicate to your listeners, and that's important.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So what are, I guess, $17.6 billion budget? What are some things that you'd like our listeners to know?
Well, I think the first thing, Todd, is that we are giving a massive tax cut to Nova Scotians, which averages about $1,000 a family. It's not one thing; it's about 4 different ways we're doing that. We're taking 1% off the HST. We're increasing the basic personal amount. We're getting rid of bracket creep. So we're indexing the brackets, and so we're doing all of those things and that amounts to a $500 million tax cut, which we believe will stimulate our economy in what you've said is very uncertain times. And we're also increasing minimum wages. That's another thing we're doing. Mm-hmm. And we also, Todd, I think it's important for your listeners to know we are spending an historic amount on hospitals, schools, roads, and housing, all those things. So we're doing a lot of different things. We're spending more money on infrastructure, which Nova Scotians need, and we're delivering on campaign promises. And there's a lot in the budget. We're also ramping up the school lunch program, so it'll be expanded at a quicker pace than we had planned. So it was a very successful year one roll-in. So we're doing that. So there's a lot in the budget for Nova Scotians, and we believe, Todd, that all of the things that we're doing will drive our economy forward in what are very uncertain times, really.
Okay, so nearly a $700 million deficit. This is some. What are you concerned about this, or when do you plan on a balanced budget? Is this something that you would like to do? Obviously, you'd prefer to have a balanced budget, but how much of a priority will it be to get back to balanced budgets?
So we have a plan back to balanced budgets. What I will say is that each of our first 4 budgets that we've delivered were deficit budgets. The last one was the 24-25 was close to, wasn't quite that much, but close to that, and we delivered a small surplus. So we've seen the economy grow, and that's allowed us to do more. So, of course, I'm hoping that we won't see that $700 million deficit this coming year. I'm hoping that the things that we were doing will drive our economy forward. I'm optimistic, is what I should say. The other thing is that you need to know is that this capital plan we're on has been in the projections for 2 or 3 years. We've been much of it is the Halifax Infirmary expansion. So where the deficit is going is being driven by that as well. So, and the debt, right? So we're kind of we had predicted all of this stuff. So we're on target, is what I could say.
Okay, so with the deficit spending of nearly $700 million, some would say that perhaps it's a bit tone deaf to include a nearly 30% pay hike for MLAs. In fairness, it's been since 2015 since MLAs have had a pay hike. What's your message to people who feel that's a bit out of step or out of a little tone deaf?
Well, I would say that the pay hike that we are getting will put us in the middle of the pack for provinces across Canada, far less than an MP would make. I would say that, it's, anyway, I'm very pleased to get the pay hike. I didn't sign up to be an MLA for the pay in the beginning. It's not about that for me personally, and I think that I would probably say that's probably true for all 55 MLAs. It's not about the pay. It's about wanting to make a difference. So all of us work hard, whether you're in government or in opposition. That's the reality, and I sometimes say jokingly, this is a 9-to-5 job with an evening and weekend component. So I think all 55 MLAs earn that money, and again, we're in the middle of the pack.
No, but I guess is it understandable, I suppose, to put yourself in a taxpayer's vantage point, who are people whose pay raises are generally around 2%, if they're lucky, 2-3%. To see a 29% increase all in one fell swoop, what's your message to those who feel as though that might be a little abrupt?
Well, I think we haven't had a pay raise in the MLA since I believe it was 2011, certainly 2013. So this, I think that if you average it out, it's probably where it would have been had it just followed along with pay raises in the general public.
Okay, the $200 million reserve fund. Tell us more about what that might be used for. When might that be used, and how might it be used?
So it's we hope we don't have to use it. I mean, our first goal is we hope that we don't have tariffs, Todd. I can say that we've had we've appreciated the United States as a neighbor, and the amount of trade going back and forth between us and the United States is absolutely stunning. We believe that tariffs will hurt both our countries, both our people. So we're working hard. I know the Premier's working hard with the Team Canada approach with the other premiers to try to head off tariffs. So first of all, we're hoping there won't be tariffs and we won't have to use this $200 million. What we're doing, we're provisioning it as a contingency. We will use it as we need to, as if tariffs come in and we start to see the impact that they're having across Nova Scotia, we will start to use that money. Right now, I can't predict how that will be, but obviously we're signaling that if we have tariffs, we're going to intervene and shore up the sectors of the economy damaged by tariffs.
Okay, might that mean subsidies to certain businesses, to certain sectors, to businesses, individual businesses? Just a little more clarity on what the plan might be.
It could mean all of those things. It could mean other things too. So I really can't provide more clarity. And one of the reasons is we really don't know precisely what will happen. But when the time comes, we'll deal with it. When we're dealing with the issues resulting from tariffs, we will deal with it. You know, Donald Trump is changing our world. That's what I would say. One of the things that you see us doing, Todd, is resource development. We're taking a strong stand on resource development. That's really because of the threat of tariffs has really triggered our thinking, we need to be more self-reliant. We need to be doing things that we can do ourselves. We need to drive our economy forward. So that's part of the reason why that's happening. So the tariffs are having a big impact on our thinking. The contingency fund is part of that, and we hope that we don't have to use that.
Okay, so lifting the ban on fracking and uranium exploration, as you talked about, this is something that your government did not campaign on. It was not mentioned, at least not to my knowledge, during the campaign. So why the about face on this so abruptly?
I think the reality is as I just mentioned, that it was the threat of tariffs and realizing the impact that would have on our province has galvanized our thinking on, okay, what can we do to improve our own financial position? What can we do to make our province stronger? And the reality is our sons and daughters have been going out west to work in these industries for 50 years, and we believe it can be done here just as well as it in other jurisdictions. So we're not saying skirt the environmental rules. We're not saying skirt the process. We're just saying we can't live with outright bans. We have to make these things go forward in the Canadian context of safe, environmentally sustainable ways. And the other reality, Todd, is that when we look at fighting climate change, the new economy is all based on electric cars, electrification, and many of the things that we have in the ground in Nova Scotia can enable that in those industries. So the lithium, the copper, cobalt, we know that those and uranium, in fact, also, we know that the new economy, fighting CO2 emissions, all of that's all part of they are mining intensive things, and we think Nova Scotia needs to be part of that.
All right, greenhouse gas emission targets. How can they be met if these resource explorations are expanded? Well,
if we have, we know that greenhouse gas emissions targets are one of the critical ways that we will meet them is the new economy of the electrification of solar panels and windmills, and all of these things require, and electric vehicles, all of these things require massive inputs of these critical minerals. So this is part of meeting those requirements, meeting those goals.
Okay, on the tax cuts, we're talking the HST down by 1%. The tolls off the bridges in Halifax. How much total savings? And you may have covered this already. We've covered a lot of territory. What total savings would tax cuts going to? How much will that mean to Nova Scotians?
So it's a over $500 million tax cut to Nova Scotians, which is simple math. We have about 1 million people in Nova Scotia. That's about $500 for every man, woman, and child, right? So about 1,000. The average family is 2.1 people. So it's about $1,000 per family tax cut. And I think it'll make a big difference for Nova Scotians. And we know our people need those tax cuts. Taxes are high, and we are living in a time when things are going up in price. So we know that this will be very needed. So, I mean, this plus our investment in hospitals and housing and schools. We ask ourselves, can we afford to do it? But Todd, we ask ourselves, can we afford not to do this? So as a government, we think we need to step up for Nova Scotians and invest in our future.
Okay, the Auditor General and the ability to dismiss the Auditor General. Some have concerns about that, and I think justifiably so. What's your response to those who are concerned about that?
So the rules to dismiss the Auditor General were in place in the legislature already. We're clarifying those rules. We're making ourselves in line with two other provinces, I believe, Manitoba, and I think it was Saskatchewan. I don't have that in place, but we're putting those in line with other provinces, just clarifying those rules.
Okay, but the Auditor General, I think you would agree, has a pretty important role in any democracy. Certainly does good work. What about the message, though, that this sends that perhaps it's a bit dismissive of the work that the Auditor General has done and does do?
I think it's more about the clarification of the rules around it, Todd. I think that this will be thoroughly debated in the legislature, so I look forward to that debate.
Okay, Minister, I know you're busy. Thank you so much. We covered a lot of territory. Hopefully we covered the bases. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate being on, Todd. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, take care. That's the Finance Minister, John Lohr of Nova Scotia, and you can weigh in on this again when we open the phone lines between noon and 1, and I'll be chatting with Steve Murphy, by the way, later in the show between 10:30 and 11, so I'll get his take on all of this as well. Speaking of budgets, police budget is being debated in HRM, and not everybody's happy with it. We'll talk about that when we come back. All right, this from the Chronicle Herald recently. A proposed hike to Halifax Regional Police's 2025-26 budget was met with contempt during the public participation portion of the budget discussions. HRP, responsible for policing Halifax, Dartmouth, Bedford, and all communities extending from Bedford to Sambro Loop is asking for a 3.3% increase to bring its total proposed budget to just over $100 million. The department is not asking for more officers, but instead 7 new civilian positions, including a couple victim service caseworker, support manager, and others. Joining us to talk about all of this is Sue Uteck, the Executive Director of the Spring Garden Area Business Association. Hello, Sue.
Good morning, Todd.
All right, so where are the beat cops? That's what some people are asking, including you, right?
Absolutely. We've had a trial period in the Spring Garden area. It was beginning in December. It was a retail theft unit, and it showed great success. Unfortunately, that's the reality of today's times. And when we look at our crime stats in the Spring Garden area, we certainly have a business case for a full-time beat patrol.
All right, how bad is it? How bad is theft and the challenges that you're dealing with right now for your members?
Well, I'll tell you, we did a survey in September, and 9 out of 10 of our businesses reported that they had experienced theft in the last 3 months. But in fact, only 6 out of 10 reported it because they just felt that there was not going to be any positive outcome. So our theft under 5,000, this was just reported, Todd. So remember that stat. That was 567 thefts under $5,000. So, that's continuously theft all day, every day.
Wow. And you feel as though police presence would improve that situation?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen it firsthand right now. Continuing, we have an amazing community response officer in our area, Constable Paul DeRoche. Just with a combination of maintenance enforcement bylaw, just setting some rules back on the street, like you can't steal something and drink it out front, or smoke within 10 meters of a building. Just to try and clean up, get your property clean. Those things make a difference every day. So, when you have the neighborhood that's filled with pride, people will look after it and people will not steal.
Yeah, how difficult must this be for not only business owners but the people working for the businesses? I would think that this has got to be real challenging, having to deal with this real threat every day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hear from merchants on the street that, staffing is an issue because they don't want to work at night, or they don't feel comfortable being in the store alone. The same individual robbed you on Sunday and walked right back in on Monday to say, I'm here again. So it's not a good situation to be in.
Do you feel as though that the powers that be are listening? Do you think council and the police commissioner are listening, or no?
Yeah, I spoke at the budget hearing, and I just wanted to have a comment, for the people that were in the room arguing against the HRP budget. They had some really, really valid points. I'm not sure as a taxpayer that we need an armored vehicle at this point. But some of the comments, you have to remember that the HRP is moving into a division away from some of the services that police would normally do. So, one of the big issues we all see in every downtown Atlantic Canada is the mental health. We need help from the province with the severe addictions and those that are hardest to treat that are left to fend for themselves in the city.
Yes, absolutely. But like you said, I mean, if having that presence, that frontline presence, that can't be replicated, right? It's everybody know it. Like you said, it just makes sense, right?
Oh, absolutely. But if you had a frontline presence with somebody that specializes in mental health and addictions issues working alongside police, I think it would go a tremendous amount away. But again, the province needs to organize a one-day summit so we all know what we're doing. There's a lot of duplication and overlap here on that we see in the Spring Garden area, and it just puzzles me why the province does not want to have an organizational summit, nor is willing to build a long-term treatment facility. We all can see it's needed.
Yeah, probably. I would think because of the complexity of it and the cost would be a deterrent, or rather would be a detractor. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think when you have a supermajority and you see today's news from the province, I don't think it's an issue about getting anything that they want done accomplished.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. If there's a will, there's a way. And like you said, with the supermajority, they could certainly do that. So how does, I guess moving forward for businesses, you want to continue to grow the area. I mean, this is an iconic area in which you're representing the Spring Garden area business. This area, everybody knows. Throughout the Maritimes, people come to this area. Do you feel as though that the reputation will begin to hurt the area and people will start to avoid this region, or is it already happening?
I wouldn't say no. We've had, we've bucked the trend provincially and nationally across with new business openings. So there's a lot of optimism about the future of Spring Garden. With the street revitalization, people moving in. There's an air of optimism. We just need those components that will keep that air of optimism. And one of those components is a dedicated foot patrol police presence.
Indeed. Okay.
And the other thing I wanted to tell you is we are the only area, ourselves and my colleague, Paul McKinnon, in the downtown, that do not have a community policing office, which is fairly ridiculous for our size.
Indeed. Okay, Sue, listen, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll talk again.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, take care. Sue Uteck, the Executive Director of the Spring Garden Area Business Association. All right, this story. Travelers are being advised to check the status of their flight before heading to Canada's largest airport today as investigators work to determine what caused that fiery crash landing of a Delta Airlines plane. Toronto's Pearson Airport says 5% of departing flights and 6% of arriving flights have been canceled. As of 7 a.m. local time, there could be more disruptions throughout the day. It comes after the Delta flight from Minneapolis to Toronto crashed and flipped over the tarmac. On Monday, all 80 people on board survived, although 2 people remain in hospital, and it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable that nobody was killed during this crash. Really scary, and you can see the video of it. Of course, it's all over YouTube. And it just, the landing, it's just peculiar what happened. To that, this story, the chances of being in a plane crash remain slim to none, but psychologist Steve Jordans says this week's plane crash at Toronto's Pearson Airport will likely cause air travelers to think twice about flying in the short term. Jordan says recent events tend to influence people's risk perceptions regardless of the actual risk. The crash in Toronto happened just weeks after the commercial airliner about to land in Washington, D.C. crashed in midair with a U.S. Army helicopter, killing 67 people. By the way, I will be chatting with the psychologist Steve Jordans tomorrow on the show at 12 after the 12:30 news. So he'll join the show. I heard a statistic yesterday. I think it's still one in, I shouldn't cite statistics off the top of my head, but it's something like 30 million. It's still the chance of being killed in a plane crash is almost non-existent. And when you compare it to driving a vehicle and the risk, inherent risk of driving a car, it's doesn't even compare. It's not even in the same ballpark. Anyway, I'll chat with that psychologist tomorrow about this, and we'll get his take on it. One of the organizers of the 2022 convoy protest in Ottawa is expected to be sentenced today. A judge found Pat King guilty of mischief, counseling others to commit mischief, counseling others to obstruct police, and 2 counts of disobeying a court order. The Crown is seeking a 10-year sentence, while King's defense is asking for time served and probation. King was one of the most prominent figures of the 3-week demonstration against COVID-19 health measures that gridlocked streets in the capital's downtown core. All right, lots to talk about, and just the guy to talk about it all with, Steve Murphy, when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, when you've got a pile of things to talk about and you want to find the right person to talk about it with, I struck gold today with Steve Murphy, CTV special correspondent, analyst, commentator, former anchor, iconic broadcaster, of course. How's that for an intro, Steve?
It's a hard one to top, Todd. A bit of hyperbole there. I was trying to figure out what you'd want to talk about. There's nothing to talk about.
Yeah, right, eh? Unbelievable.
Really?
How much, Steve, do you think people care about budgets in this day and age?
Well, I think people have always cared about budgets insofar as they affect their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, the Houston government's budget yesterday is very, very significant, a very significant budget for a couple of reasons. Several reasons, really. First of all, there are tax cuts. The reduction in the HST will affect real people, all of us, every day, because it's only 1 percentage point. But it's 1 percentage point staying in Todd Veinott's pocket.
Yep.
The decision to remove the tolls will save people money. There's no question about it on a day-to-day basis. Both of those were promises made by campaigning Premier Houston. And I guess if I'm being fair and honest, politicians keeping promises, a good thing. On the other hand, we now are racking up very large deficits again. We have to transfer the ownership of the harbour bridges to the taxpayers of Nova Scotia on a permanent basis at a cost of several hundreds of millions of dollars. And we're going to have to essentially subsidize the operation of the bridges through tax money as opposed to tolls. So sure, when the impacts are real as they are, budgets are of a great deal of interest. The procedure surrounding budgets and the budget process and so on, I think is not of great interest to many people. Journalists and politicians and talk show hosts are probably more interested than most.
Okay, when it comes to the bridges, I mean, I would think that this would be very complex files to manage when it comes to procurement, when it comes to what needs to be replaced, I would think that would be quite a complex file. Do you have confidence that transition will be a smooth one from where it is now to what the Crown Corporation, which will take it over?
Well, I would expect so. I mean, Halifax Harbour Bridges has operated the bridges for a long time since it replaced the Halifax Dartmouth Bridge Commission. I would assume that the structure will probably change in some legal and perhaps some other ways, but I would think that the function of running the bridges will remain the same. The main difference will be in how the bridges are funded on a permanent and ongoing basis with the loss of the $35 million that is now being contributed by the users. But I would think that inside government, insofar as the average bridge user is concerned, there might not be a lot of difference, except at the end of the day, to use that shop-worn phrase, It's the taxpayers of Nova Scotia, all 1 million of us, who are now responsible for those bridges.
Okay, the Auditor General not consulted in this, and changes to the Auditor General on the heels of a pretty damning report that called out the government for its lack of accountability on billions of dollars in spending that was not approved prior. Is it fair would it be a fair assumption or not to suggest that she's been a target here and perhaps unfair?
Well, I mean, it's easy to see it that way. I think it's no secret that governments for many years, as long as I've been covering politics in the Maritime provinces and in Canada, governments have always been uncomfortable with auditors general when they do their jobs properly, because auditors general are supposed to find failings and shortcomings and faults, and occasionally they're supposed to find many positive things in the way governments operate. By the way, auditors general are not always critical. Their reports tend to get most of the attention for the criticism, of course. But I can see why the Houston government, recently emboldened by a huge election victory, is taking an opportunity to curtail the powers of the Auditor General. But I have to tell you, Todd, as a citizen and as a journalist, I am not in support of any reduction in the transparency of the operation of the government. And I'm particularly uncomfortable with the notion that secrecy, sometimes called privacy, misrepresented as such, is ever truly in the public interest. I grant you that there are some details about our lives and our work and our salaries and so on. Some of those things need to be protected by our employers, including governments, and I'm fine with that. But anything that leads to less transparency in the operation of government and in the expenditure of public funds is something that I just philosophically oppose. Having said that, and this is an important point to make, in my opinion, Mr. Houston went to the people of Nova Scotia, was given a huge mandate, rewarded with what we call a super majority. I think I said to you on this broadcast shortly after the election that with a super majority, a government is essentially untethered and it can do pretty much what it wants. And the measure of the government and its supermajority will be how far it goes in the exercise of its power. And it's quite clear from the events of yesterday that the Premier and his government intend to go quite far.
Okay, the fact that this calls for reports to be shown to the government 2 weeks before releasing them to the public, any cause for concern for that, or is that just an opportunity for the government to know what's coming and to kind of get its ducks in a row and its talking points in order?
I have no problem with the government being given some time to prepare a response. What I think I would have a problem with is if there is no response because the report is determined to be private. I bristle at the notion that reports of the Auditor General should be withheld from the public. To me, the function and the role of the Auditor General as an officer of the legislature, not an employee of the government, I mean, yes, on the payroll of the government, but the Auditor General is supposed to be an officer of the legislature. And I am most comfortable when Auditors General are free to speak frankly and publicly, as our Auditors General have long done, without being corralled or curtailed by politicians who decide for one reason or another that something in their report, the Auditor General's report, is not in the public interest to be released. I just find that to be a hard pill to swallow.
All right. The bill also makes it possible with the, as you mentioned, the 2/3 majority of the House that they could dismiss the Auditor General regardless of cause or incapacity. That to me is right. that raises my eyebrows a bit. What's your take on that?
Well, it's potentially an intimidation of a sort.
Yeah.
Although the Premier will say, and I find myself in the unlikely position of reiterating that the people were given a chance to speak on this, and they said with quite an enthusiastic voice that they wanted the government to continue with a larger mandate, with a supermajority. Mm-hmm. The Premier now has a mandate to exercise his supermajority. It's a question of how far the Premier will determine he wants to go. And based on the flooding of the zone, to quote Steve Bannon, the flooding of the zone with these announcements yesterday on Budget Day, of all days, makes it quite clear to me that the Premier is intent on pushing through significant structural changes in the operation of the government, and to do so with less accountability to the opposition and to the public through the media, because the Premier has also decided to curtail the ages-old practice of scrums in the legislature. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a sometimes not very pretty scene that unfolds down there, but it has gone on for a long time, just feet away from where Joseph Howe was the originator, the creator of the modern free press in this province and in this country. So I see all of this as being a bit troubling. Having said that, the Premier will say he was given a mandate, and indeed he was, and he's now going to see how far he can take it.
All right, pay increases. This is something that nearly a 30%, 29% pay increase. Look, it's been since 2013 since they've had any increase at all to their pay, and I've always been a supporter of good pay for people who want to run for public office for a variety of reasons. I think it's necessary. But that said, Steve, 29% and one fell swoop is a bit eye-popping for the general public. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree that 29% is a big number. There won't be too many among us who get 29% pay raises this year or any year. To be accurate in the analysis of this, it is a long time since the members and the cabinet ministers have had a pay raise for a number of reasons, some of which were highly political, some of which were very, practical, symbolic. When the Premier reduced his own pay and Stephen McNeil froze the pay of the politicians, there were any number of reasons for that. But the result is after 12 years, the base salaries haven't increased any, haven't changed any. So it is time for a catch-up. I personally, Todd, would not have done it in this particular fashion because it seems to me the time to announce your plans to increase politicians' pay is right before an election, right? So that people can determine whether they are comfortable with what you have in mind. I suggested in a piece I did for CTV not long ago that it ought to be required as part of a party's platform that the party state its intended pay scale for elected officials, including cabinet ministers, these ministerial assistants, and so on, so that the people can decide whether they agree with the pay philosophy of a party that's campaigning for office. Having said that, obviously that isn't going to happen. No politician wants to be pinned down in that way, and I understand that. But I do think that the people should have ample opportunity to pass judgment on pay raises. And, what happened in this case is that we had an election, and now within just a few months of the election, all of the people who got elected are getting significant increases in pay in one fell swoop. Again, I understand that some catch-up is appropriate, but I also agree with you that puts the political class well ahead of everybody else in the province in terms of their income from this year. One other thing, if I might add, Todd,
Sure.
we have a very large cabinet in Nova Scotia because, of course, we have a large government caucus. But now we have every member of the caucus in some other official role that results in getting more money. I question the need for a cabinet as large as it is, and I particularly question the need or the value of having so many ministerial assistants. These roles are relatively rare in Nova Scotia. I know other provinces have them. Parliamentary secretaries are another matter. We've long had those in Parliament and so on, and I can see where ministers in the most complex portfolios should have parliamentary assistants or ministerial assistants. But I do question whether every minister needs a ministerial assistant so that, in fact, at the end of the process, every member of the government caucus is getting a bump up in pay for some official government role. That appears to be a clear case of the government just wanting to make sure everybody on the government side is getting some more money. I don't think that is the sort of thing that people in Nova Scotia voted for when they voted at the last election.
All right, lots of other things to get to, including Nova Scotia government bill lifting ban on fracking and uranium exploration. But we need a break, Steve. So can you hang with us and spend a little more time with us after the break?
Happy to do so.
Okay, great stuff. We'll be back with Steve Murphy. All right, before I continue my chat with Steve Murphy, we've got a couple sets of Mooseheads tickets to give away for Friday's game against Charlottetown. If you'd like there's 2 pairs of tickets. If you'd like it set, we caller 6 and 8 now at 902-405-6000. Caller 6 and 8 gets the pair of tickets to see the Moose host Charlottetown. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Steve, I want to ask you about the bill which would lift the ban on fracking and uranium exploration. I mean, the Premier does not mince words at all when it comes to all of this. He is quite clear and adamant that he feels that it's time to get this and do this, and it appears as though he's taken advantage of, to use that term, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, of what is perceived as a potential crisis with the United States and this whole tariff thing. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, again, I'm going to come back to the point I made earlier repeatedly, Todd, and that is the Premier has a supermajority, and the Premier feels enabled to do pretty much what he wants, and it's virtually certain that the government will be able to pass legislation which has the parliamentary majority to do so. I have long thought that it is appropriate to at least reconsider any moratorium that have been in place for a long time on resource development or anything else. Circumstances and technologies change over time. We have long banned shale gas fracking, for example, and uranium exploration in the province for reasons that at the time of moratorium sounded like a good idea. And perhaps there are those who believe, in fact, there are those who believe that these things should never be reconsidered or never be done. I am of the mind that it is appropriate to at least consider what we might be able to do to extract these resources at a reasonable, and I would underscore reasonable, cost to the environment in the interest of economic development, because governments do have to try to find balance between economic opportunity, environmental responsibility, social responsibility, and so on. So I have no particular objection to considering these things and in proceeding with them in a prudent fashion if it can be done. There will, of course, be opportunities, although fewer opportunities, with other changes announced by the government yesterday to the Law Amendments Committee and so on, for voices of criticism and opposition to be heard. But it would be my impression and strong feeling that the Premier is quite intent on proceeding with these things and will do so. Is he using the economic threat posed by America as an excuse? You might say it's an excuse. You might say it's a reason, but it is at least a factor. And I think that it's a factor that should be also weighed and considered in a decision to proceed.
Do you think there's been an attitude of no in as he has said, no in Nova Scotia? Is that a fair categorization of Nova Scotians?
Well, it's at first at least a very clever slogan, take the no out of Nova Scotia. I've heard others use it. Look, there are some people who are philosophically, morally, ethically very opposed to this sort of resource exploitation. And I find it very important to hear those points of view articulated by the EAC and other organizations. At the same time, there are many voices in the province that are calling for greater economic growth, greater economic activity, particularly in light of the threats from America. So government is a balancing act. And in this case, it is, I think, important to take a look at the balance between what we are doing and what we might need to do to continue to succeed, particularly in light of the constant threat from what I call the land of the giants, where we are now in the grips of a giant who might just decide to squeeze the life out of us just for the fun of it, apparently.
Okay, to that, what are your expectations when it comes to tariffs? I believe it's the 4th of March is when they're now scheduled, but anything can change with this guy, with Donald Trump. And the unpredictable nature, that's part of his shtick at this point, is it not? To keep people guessing and keep people on their toes? Yeah, that's part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Keep everybody on their toes, keep everybody off balance. I mean, it's, Todd, it's a classic bully tactic to continue to threaten smaller people. And again, I come back to my analogy to the 1960s television series, The Land of the Giants, where little tiny 6-inch people land on a planet of 6-foot people. We look exactly the same, but they're 10 times or 100 times bigger than we are. And I feel that is somewhat the case with the United States. We've never really been eye to eye with America in many important respects because they're so much bigger than we are, so much more powerful militarily, but also economically. And it's also important to remember, and you and I've talked about this before, we have made ourselves more vulnerable by not fulfilling our obligations to some of our shared responsibilities, not only with the Americans, but with all of the Western allies. And as you may know, I'm speaking specifically of the NATO commitment, which is 2% of GDP at the moment, but it's going to move to 3 or 3.5% of GDP, and we will be even further behind. So it is important, I think, for Canada at this point to begin to reassert its sovereignty by fulfilling our existing commitments, or in the case of defense, I'll even go so far as to say by exceeding it, and to do so quickly.
Okay, this 51st state routine is more than old at this point, and it doesn't appear that it's going away anytime soon. How should we, or how could we better react to this?
Well, I think we're reacting as people who've been insulted should react. It's insulting. It's disrespectful. It shows a great misunderstanding of the Canadian nation. If I might be so bold, I think it also reveals that Mr. Trump doesn't even really understand how his own country works. Because in what ways would the United States actually make Canada a 51st state? How would that actually ever happen? And by the way, I agree with all of our national leadership that we don't want it to happen. It's a terrible idea, and moreover, it's insulting. But I think that it's rhetoric that is designed to provoke, but even worse, it's just plain disrespectful. And I'm sorry, but politics is one thing, but disrespect on this level is offensive. I think we would be, to answer a question you posed here, I think it was last week or maybe even yesterday, why aren't others speaking up for Canada? I think we will get more support from our Western allies when we start supporting them, again, through our NATO commitment, by finishing our trade agreement with the United Kingdom, which has still not been passed by Parliament and so on. We've got to start really reasserting our relationships with other allies, because it's clear that our longtime friend and ally, our next door neighbor, is now being led by someone for whom, frankly, we cannot have any trust. Someone who does not respect us, our sovereignty, or our leadership, and someone who does not respect the role that we've played in the development of an integrated North American economy, particularly when it comes to automobiles and other transborder manufacturing.
Always great, Steve. Wish I had more time with you. Thanks, pal. Appreciate it.
Okay, if there's ever anything else, Todd,
Yeah. When we get a busier day, we'll give you a call.
I can't wait for the open hour either because, my gosh, so much to talk about just from the legislature yesterday.
Indeed. Thanks, Tal. Thanks, Steve.
Oh, all right, Todd.
Okay,
Thank
take
you.
care. Steve Murphy, CTV special correspondent, analyst, commentator, former anchor, of course. And speaking of the open lines, we'll have the phone lines open for you between noon and 1. Next, it's House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a call at 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis, when we come back. All right, a reminder, we will be taking your calls between noon and 1 later today, and lots to get to, and I have all types of questions for you, including this pay raise of 29% for MLAs. What are your thoughts on that? Now, they haven't had a pay raise in a very, very long time, in fairness, but it's a little eye-popping, I must say, to see in one fell swoop a pay raise of nearly 30%. Again, we can debate the merits of that and whether that's appropriate or not, but lots of other things to talk about as well. We've got the budget, lots to unpackage when it comes to the ongoing battle with the United States and the 25% tariff threats and hockey, and talk a little more Sid Crosby as well. And so all of that and lots more to get to. I've reached out to the Auditor General as well. I would like to chat with the Auditor General, not today, but perhaps tomorrow or Friday, to get her response to what was talked about in the budget concerning her powers and the ability for the supermajority to dismiss the Auditor General basically without cause, which I thought was very interesting. So lots to talk about when we open the phone lines, as mentioned, in about an hour's time. Now it's time for House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. If you've got a question, health-related, for Dr. Gillis, now is a great opportunity to get some advice from Dr. Gillis, who's got a wealth of knowledge and experience. 902-405-6000. That is the way to do it. Dr. John Gillis, welcome to the program as always.
Good day, sir. How are we doing?
I'm well. Are you watching? I'm assuming you're watching, like most hockey fans, the Four Nations Cup. Pretty good stuff, eh? Pretty good hockey. I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah, it's been fun, and it's actually great to see international hockey without the international rules, where if you blow in the direction of your opponent, you get a 5-minute major. They can, it's hockey. They're letting them play, and it's aggressive. It's physical. The odd political debate at center ice right at the beginning of the game can't be harmful.
Yeah, for sure. Those fights. I mean, that obviously emotion spilled over. What are your thoughts on booing and expressing displeasure during national anthems? Is that something that you support, or do you have an opinion on?
Look, I go back and forth on it. I mean, I think if you'd asked me that, 6 months ago or even 3 months ago, I would have said, I find it disrespectful in general. I think I have come around to where I think many people are, is, we're not booing Americans. We're not booing those players. We're sending a message to, I'll choose the nicest word I can think of, a idiot strongman who's threatening our country, and that's the message. So I'm not sure if I would do it or not, but I certainly understand how people feel.
Yeah, for sure. Any predictions on tomorrow night's game?
Sid the Kid in OT.
Really, eh? Nice. I made a cardinal error yesterday of suggesting that Sid Crosby is no longer the best player for Canada, suggesting that McKinnon was, and received a backlash from people. I guess that's sacrosanct here in the home of Sid Crosby, but he's leading the tournament in points and certainly showing the way in leadership wearing the C. So I guess I have to eat my words on that one.
Well, you know what? It's been impressive. I mean, I didn't come up with this on my own, but you look at the NFL, the Pro Bowl's basically flag football. The NBA guys go out there and have a shoot around, and meanwhile, these guys are out there, dropping gloves before the first shot's even been taken. They're taking it seriously, and the Americans too, to give them credit. They're fighting hard, and they're playing for Johnny Gaudreau, and they're taking it seriously. And ultimately, I just hope it's a good game of hockey. And it's I don't know if you've ever been to the Garden in Boston when you're cheering for the other team. It's an interesting place. Yeah,
indeed. I have had that opportunity. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. The level of fitness of these guys, though, I mean, and of course, women in the PWHL is just unbelievable. They are true phenoms. They're a spectacle to be seen physically, what they can do. It's unreal, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think we forget about this, and look, it's like this in any professional sport. But the level of attention to detail, preparation, strength, fitness, diet, everything, they're phenomenal, and you nailed it. I mean, the same with the women's teams. I mean, we see it on the pro rugby and the international rugby side. Just the level of commitment, fitness, and dedication is is phenomenal. But that's why a guy like Sidney Crosby I know how old he is because I looked it up. At 37,
Yep.
can still compete at that level. And same with Marchand. I didn't realize he was 36. He's still out there giving her for the love of the game. And these boys don't have to be there. They're there because they love it, and it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and they used to show up. I mean, hockey back in the day, of course, they didn't. Some players had to work over the summer, for goodness sakes. That's how much things have changed. But players showed up at camp to get in shape. Now you show up in shape. It's changed. It's totally changed, right?
Well, I mean, if you don't, you're not playing.
Right.
It's somebody who wants your job, and it's somebody that's been, doing CrossFit and running all summer and is in, superhuman shape. And it's just the way it is. Talent only takes you so far. And, you hear the stories from the old days of the NHL where the boys used to party and do all sorts of things. That doesn't fly anymore.
For sure. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. It's House Calls with Dr. Gillis. If you've got a health-related question, give us a buzz. 902-405-6000. The budget was presented yesterday, I should say. Health spending to rise by 8% to almost $6 billion. Obviously, you in healthcare would, I'm assuming you'd be a proponent of any increase to health spending. But I think, Dr. Gillis, we need to not just look at increases in spending as the only measurement. How that money is spent, I think needs some more attention. What are your thoughts on how we spend money instead of just how much money we spend?
Well, it needs to be tied to outcomes, right? And look, I believe that the Houston government is generally trying to make a difference in healthcare, as I believe previous governments have. The money we spend needs to be tied to getting productivity. Having another, and look, you've heard me say this ad nauseum, having another doctor here is great. What are they doing? How many patients a day are they seeing? How are they being paid relative to what they're doing? Are we getting good outcomes, for what we're spending money on? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. And it's that accountability and process planning that is so critically important.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, people can say train more doctors, but that takes time away from people like you who have to train the doctor. And I guess it's not an easy roadmap any way you look at it, right?
I mean, look, there's a lot of red tape. I'm trying to arrange to work with a nurse practitioner right now, but finding a way to pay that person for the work that they do, around billing and all that sort of thing is very difficult. It's it should be easier than it is. It's still red tape that gets in the way. So anyway, and look, efforts are ongoing, and I just hope some of them move along in a focused fashion. But it is good to see funds being dedicated to healthcare, of course.
Yeah, for sure. And some other barriers, removing parking at hospitals. It looks it parking fees. It may seem like a small thing, but if it impacts you, and for some people on tight budgets and wanting to visit people in hospital or whatever, that all matters, right? I believe that matters.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's some people see it as symbolism, but it's money in people's pockets. And sometimes at a tough time, you're like, why the hell do I have to pay $2 to go see my loved one who's sick or dying? It's understandable.
Indeed. Okay. 902-405-6000. We get some open lines for you folks. If you'd like to chat with Dr. John Gillis, give us a call, 902-405-6000. House Calls continues when we come back. All right, House Calls continues with Dr. John Gillis, 902-405-6000. We got open lines for you folks. If you've got a health-related question or concern, now is the opportunity to get it addressed by Dr. Gillis, who has decades of experience and knowledge and ready to impart his wisdom for you as best he can. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis, this story on the CTV website, positivity rates for influenza continue to rise, with the latest numbers tying the 2022-2023 season's peak for the highest since the COVID-19 pandemic at 24.3% of tests detecting the virus. So look, we talk about this every week, but it's I guess inevitable. You're gonna get influenza. It's gonna spread around, but people can do things to minimize this. And it's the same stuff, right? Wash your hands, wear a mask, don't go out, don't go to work if you don't have to. There's nothing new here. There's nothing new advice to impart, but people, it's worth repeating, right?
Yeah, I mean, my speech to people is, this year, above all, there's a lot going around. The flu's rampant, COVID is still there, RSV is there, adenovirus. So there's a lot of stuff going around making people sick. So as you said, if you're sick, stay home. If you have to go out and you have any symptoms, wear a mask so you don't hack all over everybody. And get your immunizations. And, people will complain that influenza is only 60, 70% effective. That's true. But 60 is better than 0 based on my limited math skills. COVID vaccines still work. They prevent people from getting really sick. If you're elderly, unfortunately, the RSV vaccine is expensive, but for those with coverage, I highly recommend getting that. Protect yourself from whatever you can. And again, we're not trying to be draconian here. We're just trying to prevent people from getting sick. And, we're seeing a lot of it at the hospital. And, I know it's frustrating for people, particularly with the wait times. I mean, I saw someone yesterday that had been there for 8 hours, and the person's like, I think I have the flu. I'm like, you're correct. So do I need an x-ray and antibiotics? No, you don't. You need Tylenol and ibuprofen. And they got, they weren't happy to hear that. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's a virus. It's going to run its course. You're young, healthy, your oxygen's normal. Not that we ignore it. I mean, they get a set of vitals and check their oxygen, make sure they're okay. Because some people can get very sick from influenza, particularly elderly people. But, typically if you're young and healthy, it needs to run its course, and it's symptom control. And, probably the big message I'd impart to people out there is, educate yourself as best you can, or talk to your pharmacist about, the proper way to take drugs like acetaminophen, also known as Tylenol, or ibuprofen, also known as Advil. They're different drugs. They sort of do the same thing. If you've got a nasty case of the man flu, take 2 Tylenol, 3-4 hours later, take 2 Advil, and keep alternating them. It keeps the fever down, keeps the aches down. The best treatment for man flu is those things and, rest. And not being a man, I suppose.
Yeah, there you go. 902-405-6000. Give us a call again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Antibiotics, what's the danger of overprescribing antibiotics, Dr. Gillis? Well,
drug resistance. So, bugs, that cause pneumonia, bacteria, the certain type of bug, they see the antibiotic once, they all die. They see it more times. A few of the stronger ones live, and then after a while, we have superbugs that won't respond to anything. And this is why we want to give antibiotics when it's necessary, but when it's not necessary, we want to stay away from it. The other thing is you hear about people talk about C. diff, Clostridium difficile, which is a bug that is always around, but when we take antibiotics, it changes the bacteria in our bowels and allows sometimes this bug to go wild, and it can make people very sick. It can actually, cause severe diarrhea, dehydration, and it can very seriously harm particularly elderly folk or people with other medical conditions. So we try to be more circumspect and careful about our use of antibiotics now. And I think that message has gotten out there to some degree. The expectation isn't quite as rampant as it used to be, but it's still out there. I've got a virus, I've got a sore throat. The last time I had a sore throat, the doctor gave me antibiotics. The sore throat went away, therefore I need them this time. Sore throat went away because you had a virus, and a glass of whiskey, antibiotics, some green tea, all of the above, if you'd taken them for 3 or 4 days, would have made your virus go away. And that message needs to be reinforced.
Okay, scope of practice for pharmacists and what they can and cannot do. Can you get into that a bit? Because I think it's important that people have clarity because that's important that people can get things done at the pharmacy, obviously. So let everybody know about the scope of practice for pharmacists if you can.
Well, I'm not an expert on everything that they can do, but there are 2 major things a pharmacist can do. Extend existing prescriptions if people aren't able to get in to see their doctor or nurse practitioner or other provider, which is important. And, increasingly can diagnose and treat, minor ailments like UTIs, throat infections, that sort of thing. And often provide just good general advice on, over-the-counter meds, treating common viruses and colds, and just provides a very good resource for understanding how you treat certain things, but also often a way to prevent having to go to the hospital or, if you can't get into your doctor/NP or you don't have one.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, there are other options as well. People can use information technology. You've been a proponent of this, but telehealth. There's also drawbacks to telehealth as well, right?
Well, yeah. One of the big drawbacks of telehealth is, if some things can't be assessed, over the phone or even over video, you have to put your hands on somebody, or you have to listen to their chest. You have to check their belly. So what we see a little too much of in the emerge is, I talked to my doctor on the phone. They weren't sure, so they told me to come here. And, that doesn't do anybody any good. It takes a slot, that person has been, we say seen, but has been communicated with, and they end up in the emerge anyway. So it's sort of defeating the purpose. And, I think we need to find, to rediscover that balance of in-person and telehealth. For a lot of things, it's great. I have patients who live in Bridgewater who are stable, need their Celebrex and anti-inflammatory renewed for their knee pain. They don't need to be cruising up the 103 in bad weather to see me. As long as I can determine they're doing well, I can renew their stable meds. But, not everything that applies to.
Okay, here's an email question from Frank, and it's quite frank, the content, but I'll read it nonetheless. It says, I'm 62 years old, and 2 or 3 times per day I feel wetness between my butt cheeks. Again, I'm just reading the email. It says, I wipe in evidence of small leakage. Nothing is evident in my undershorts, so leakage is not heavy. My young doctor says sphincter muscles get weak as we get older. I said my prostate was not checked in 10 years. Doctor says she checks with blood work. Question, is this possible concern for other issues? Should I just live with this, or should I see a specialist? If so, what type of specialist?
Well, look, if you're having leakage, that's obviously, it's shitty. It's distressing. It's not fun. It may just be that, but it could be a sign of other bowel problems. So, a gastroenterologist would be the logical place. That's a long wait to get in. But if it's ongoing and causing problems, I'd circle back with the family doctor and check it again, because it's not fun. Now, if it's just a loose stool thing, it just maybe that some fiber or some Imodium or something to thicken things up. Lay off the bad Mexican food and change some diet.
On the prostate, does the PSA number is that enough of a scan, or do you need the old digit check as well?
My answer is no. The ground has shifted on that over the years with, conflicting data and opinions. Typically it is recommended that between 50 and 70 that, for healthy people without symptoms, every 2 years is a good benchmark for a digital prostate exam. And that doesn't mean that you use your Apple Watch. That means that, we joke about this, but it's not an Apple Watch. It's a digit, meaning a finger. And it's got it goes inside to examine the size, contour, any tenderness of the prostate, and that is important. And some docs don't like to do it. That's fact. It's as I often joke, it's not the highlight of anybody's day, but it's a necessary evil.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. We've got Dr. Gillis to the top of the hour and get some room for you as well. If you've got a health-related question or concern, now is the opportunity to chat with Dr. Gillis. 902-405-6000. House Calls continues when we come back. All right, it's House Calls with Dr. John Gillis, 902-405-6000. That is the way to get in on the fun. Again, 902-405-6000. Christopher's giving us a call. Hello, Christopher.
Hi, how are you guys?
We're well.
Question for the doctor here. I was walking one day about a month ago, and I slipped on ice, and my knee went kind of like all the way back, my leg. Now, my knee's been sore, and I acted like a man taking Advil, and the Advil helps, but then when it wears off, it gets back being sore again. I'm wondering if there could be something that got torn in there.
Well, I mean, absolutely. It's a matter of going in and getting her assessed to see if it appears to be soft tissue, see if it appears to be, a ligament. Could be any number of things. So yeah, I mean, the answer is probably you inflamed something. The Advil takes care of it temporarily. My speech on Advil is it lasts about 6 hours, and people take it once a day, and then don't take it again, and it wears off. If you're going to take something, take something that's going to last. I like Aleve better because it lasts 12 hours. A couple of Aleve twice a day is more effective than ibuprofen, for example. But ultimately, these things usually settle down with time, so you can wait it out, manage it with ice, anti-inflammatories, or you can, maybe get someone to take a look at it, whether it's your doc, NP, or physio, to see if there's, what the diagnosis is. And, sometimes the diagnosis, helps the treatment, whether it's a brace, whether it's some local treatment, cutting your leg off and telling you to get lost, whatever they think is appropriate.
Well, that might work
for you, but if it's not there, it can't hurt, right?
Well, no, I was just trying to think of exercises to do to try and keep it going too, right?
Yeah, I'll stop making bad jokes now. Sorry.
That's okay. I only need one leg.
Strengthening the knee can be very helpful, and I've talked about this a few times. I had terrible knee problems last year. I'd lost a lot of muscle mass. My knee was swollen, and talking to my ortho buddy, he checked it out, he imaged it and everything, but ultimately what fixed it was rebuilding the strength around it by biking and starting with light weights and building it up. And it sucked and it hurt initially, but it's made a huge difference to the point where I've gone from having a ton of pain to having no pain. So that strengthening the muscles around the legs, leg extensions, hamstring curls, anything you can do to strengthen those quads and those hamstrings, those muscles around the knee, help stabilize the knee, and it'll help you feel better.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, Chris. Take care. 902-405-6000. Nelson, hello.
Good day, gentlemen.
Hi.
I just have a question here for you. I don't want to take up your time. Now, a couple of people that I know have already passed, and a friend of mine is battling in the hospital with influenza A. Now, I just thought the flu was the flu. But what's the difference between influenza A and B? I'll just let you go. Listen to the answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just different variations of a virus that affect people in different ways. There are so many subtypes of the flu virus that it's hard to keep track of. But what we're seeing a lot of around right now, is influenza A. But they both, basically do the same thing, cause the same symptoms, and depending on the year and the strain, can be equally dangerous or very minor. It really depends. So what they've identified, the strain that's affecting this individual is A. But there are a lot of subtypes and strains out there. So hope that answers.
Okay, 902-405-6000. Here's an email question from Dawn. Says, did Dr. Gillis notice an increase in the number of ER visits after the weekend storm and driveway ice situation? And what recommendations might the doctor have for elderly people shoveling heavy snow?
Yeah, look, I worked yesterday. I'm working days, the odd time now. I walked in there, and they looked like the staff thought it was Dracula showing up and that the light would, tear the skin off me. But I managed to make it through the day. All day long, young people, old people, everybody, fall down, go boom. And, not people doing anything unusual, just trying to walk out of their house or go to work or what have you. I see yesterday a broken wrist, a broken ankle, one younger woman who had fallen on her back. Nothing was broken, but, she was in rough shape. And, there's no magic answer other than, particularly for elderly people, if you can shovel yourself, that's great. But you want to be, the actual act of shoveling, be careful, don't overdo it, because you could hurt yourself, or if you have other health problems, ask for help a neighbor, do whatever you can to help people out. It's been tough. You couldn't even find salt. I went to 6 gas stations on the weekend, and there just wasn't any. And so if you're able to help people out, particularly your elderly neighbors, please do so. And think about footwear. Think about wearing boots, not slipperier types of shoes. But it's sometimes easier said than done. I mean, you're trying to walk, and what we expect as a clean sidewalk, it's been impossible. So, just encourage people to be careful and safe out there.
Right, and of course, shoveling heavy snow, people who are out of shape, and I would say that probably most people, for most people, that's hard work, even if you're in shape. There's a risk there to your heart health, I would assume, risk of, I don't want to fearmonger here, but that's a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of heavy lugging, and can be dangerous in a lot of ways potentially to your heart. Any advice, Dr. Gillis?
Well, it's not that shoveling is specifically dangerous to your heart. It's any activity that you're not used to, where you're working harder than you're normally used to doing. So I mean, if you have partially blocked arteries and you're not doing heavy activity and you're just walking or doing your daily activity, it's not going to cause you a problem. But if you have that level of blockage and you do more than you normally would do, as people sometimes want to, and like, people are fiercely independent. They're like, it's my driveway, I'm going to shovel it, I don't need help. No, I'm not that way. That ship sailed for me ages ago. I hate shoveling. I'd rather work and pay the kid down the street to shovel my driveway, but that's just me. But not everybody has that option. Always try to help people if you can, and if you're elderly or have heart problems, just be careful.
902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us again, 902-405-6000. I would assume also with slips and falls and this time of year, orthopedics is all obviously probably backed up, I would think. Any word on orthopedic surgeons and their workload? Must be hefty at this point, at this time of the year.
Yeah, I mean, those folks are always flat out. Trying to deal with just the routine stuff, the joint replacements and all that stuff, injuries. But add a bunch of fractures on. Yeah, it's busy, and they work really hard to keep up. And we have a good process in Dartmouth anyway. That if we have a fracture, we have a book, and we can just book people into clinic. We don't have to call and do all those things. It's just there's a process to make it happen, and they do a really good job of following up on folks.
How much work can you do in the ER as far as setting bones and getting people on their way?
Depends what it is. I mean, a simple wrist fracture, that's not complicated, or, shattered, we will reduce those, meaning pull on them and try to put them back into their proper place and put a cast on them. Some things don't need to be reduced and can just be casted or splinted, and some things clearly need surgical intervention. And, it's all different, but which is why having that orthopedic support is quite important. But we're also very fortunate to have, paramedics and nurses that we work with who have, can assist with the casting, splinting, and that sort of thing to provide people ideally with better and quicker service.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. We've got Dr. Gillis to the top of the hour. Got some room for you as well, folks. If you'd like to chat with the doctor, if you've got a health-related question or concern, give us a call at 902-405-6000. House calls continues when we come back. All right, House Calls continues with Dr. John Gillis, 902-405-6000. We've got Dr. Gillis to the top of the hour. If you'd like to ask him a question, health-related, of course, 902-405-6000 is the way to do so. Here's an email question from Christina, then we'll go back to the phones. Christina says, I had recently had bronchitis, was very sick. I couldn't get a doctor to look at me. I called Maple, was told they couldn't diagnose me over the phone. Twice I called them. I have puffers from previous bouts of this. I knew what it was, but they totally denied me of any sort of advice or treatment over the phone. After standing outside for an hour at the Mill Cove Scotia Medical Clinic, I finally got in, was then appointed a time to return for the appointment, which was that afternoon. The doctor treated me for bronchitis, which I already knew I had, and I also had an ear infection. The doctor gave me a prescription for the bronchitis, had a prescription for ear drops. When I got them filled at Costco, the pharmacist told me that the prescription to treat bronchitis infection was to treat skin irritations and didn't cover bronchitis. So he changed the prescription for me. He also had to adjust the ear drops for 3 times twice a day to 4 times twice a day. What I would like to know is, what would have been the outcome to me taking a prescription for skin irritation instead of for bronchitis? Kind of makes me nervous to go back to this doctor.
Yeah, that's tough to pull apart just from email. I'm not really sure. I can't answer that.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Paul, hello.
Good day, guys. Doctor, if you weren't a doctor, what would you have been? And do you have any other special attributes that maybe we don't know about? And I'll hang up and listen to the answer.
Okay, there you go.
Who knows? It's a tough question. I haven't thought about that. Is it what you would have dreamed to do, or what would have been more likely? I mean, I think I grew up around politics and a bunch of lawyers, and as much as I love them all, that's probably one of the reasons I didn't go that way. But I certainly have a lot of respect for people who study the law and work in that area, and might have gone that way. Beyond that, I think we all dream of, when we were younger, did we do all we could do in sports? I see kids growing up now where their parents are too obsessed. They're in, 7 days a week doing something in camps, from the time they're 5, which is probably too much. They don't get a chance to grow up. In my case, I tried to play, 7 sports instead of focusing on 1 or 2, and I had a lot of fun, and I don't regret it. But every now and again, you're like, might I have made that junior C team had I kept going, or gone a little higher in something. So you think about those things. But hey, look, happy with how it's gone, and grateful, and enjoy doing what I'm doing, and enjoy doing this. This is fun, and makes me think about stuff and learn a few things and remember things that I forgot about. So thanks to Todd and to everyone who calls in and listens. I appreciate it. We appreciate it.
How many more years do you think you'd want to stay at it, Dr. Gillis? At the profession, that is.
Well, ask me that tomorrow morning after my night shift.
Sure.
No, I don't know. I don't think I'll ever fully retire. I don't sit still really well. But 5 to 10, I'd say.
Well, that's good. 5 to 10 is not bad. We can keep you around. Susan wants to know what travelers should know about how to stay safe and healthy before traveling south.
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is it depends what you mean by south. If you mean you're going to Yarmouth, watch for moose on the road and don't hit one. If you're talking the Caribbean or Mexico, I think the first piece is to look at the advisories as to where you're going, as to immunizations or specific things that are required for those countries. Some places, require malaria pills, some places don't. You want to make sure you're up on your hepatitis A and B and your tetanus. There are sometimes people need, typhoid vaccine, Dukoral to prevent stomach illnesses. It really depends where you're going, and, being smart about, what you eat, protecting yourself from the sun, protecting yourself from bug bites, all those sorts of things. So there's some very general stuff, and then there's some stuff that's specific to where you're going. I guess is my best advice. How much insurance do you think is safe for people to carry when it comes to health insurance when they're traveling south, or anywhere for that matter, out of country? It's a really hard thing to answer because you see these numbers and it's hard to pick apart what they mean. I've got $5 million of liability insurance, and I'm not sure I know what that means. I mean, I think it's important to, speak to an advisor and get something that is going to cover you, if something bad happens in another country. And insurance companies are pretty, look, they want your money, but, they typically want to provide coverage that's going to be enough for people. But just make sure that, you have enough coverage. And, the other thing that people sometimes forget is, there are exclusions with things. For example, when we travel to play rugby in another jurisdiction or another country, you need to make sure that, and you got to read the fine print. You can't, if you're in Boston, you can't play a violent contact sport. You can't ride a camel. You can't, do certain things. If you don't read that and you get hurt or something happens, you're not covered. Pre-existing conditions is another one. You need to make sure that if you're traveling and you have a certain health condition that, that's known to the provider, and that if you have, an attack of whatever it is that you have previously, that they don't say, well, tough toodles here, and, don't cover you. And sadly, these bills can be, life-destroying, and people don't realize how lucky they are in Canada that, they don't get $100,000 bills for, in some cases, some simple things, or, several hundred thousands to millions for, prolonged and complicated hospital and ICU stays. So just make sure you're properly covered.
Philip, hello.
Good morning. I'd like to ask the doctor a question, please.
Sure.
Doctor, I was in the ER there last Thursday, and I was diagnosed with pericarditis, and they prescribed colchicine and naproxen, and I've been on it now for almost a week. But last couple of days, I've gotten the diarrhea a couple of different times throughout the day because of the colchicine, which I was on before months ago, and it did the same thing, and I ended up with the diarrhea for 8 days. So I'm just wondering, I can't get a hold of my doctor for another week or so, and I'm just wondering where I'm experiencing the diarrhea. Should I stay on that colchicine for now?
I mean, that's a hard question to answer without knowing everything about your health care. But, I mean, I guess the question is diarrhea is obviously annoying, and diarrhea can be treated. Is it 20 times a day and incapacitating? Is there blood in it? Or is it, a couple times a day and annoying? If it's the latter, you can probably manage it with, some fiber and some Imodium and get through it till the pericarditis is over. If it's incapacitating, you can understand why you'd want to stop, but it might cause a flare-up in the pericarditis. That's a tough question to answer. But, generally speaking, I would try to manage the symptoms first. And if that's not working, you would then stop it, but you might need to look for another alternative.
So I'll stay on it until I get a hold of my family doctor, basically, then, eh?
Yes, well, I mean, I can't tell you definitively what to do. I don't know you, but, as long as you can manage the diarrhea and it's not killing you, maybe try keep yourself hydrated, try some Imodium, and hopefully the amount of time you're on the colchicine is limited, and you'll be able to stop it, and the diarrhea will go away.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Take care. Mike, hello.
I just wondered on the hepatitis A, B shots. I had one about 10 years ago. Went back in. I think it's a teeter test. Maybe that's the wrong terminology, but they did it, and they said vitamin A or hepatitis A side was good. The B shot was down. I'd have to go for a couple shots. Do you know how many shots would I have to get, doctor, for? And I went to the pharmacist, and he said he said usually you get autoimmune disease if you need to get the hepatitis B shot again. Is that true, or?
I don't know what that means. I boost people all the time. I mean, typically what I see is I'll often see people who are low on A and okay on B, or vice versa. I typically give them 2 shots of Twinrix a month apart to boost them. Some people might have a different approach, but that's usually what I do. I don't just boost B. I'll boost both, knowing that at some point the A may fade off as well. So I tend to give people a couple shots of Twinrix as a booster.
Okay, so it's just better to get both when you're getting it done anyway, I guess. That's saying.
My approach. Somebody may have a different opinion, but that's typically what I do.
Okay, doctor. Thank you.
Okay, and one last email question I wanted to get in from Tom says, would Dr. Gillis advise me on how to tactfully ask my doctor when he's going to retire? He's over 50. I'm in my 60s. It seems impolite to ask, but I'd like to prepare. That's from Tom.
Oh, that's not an easy question to ask somebody. I think some of it depends on what the relationship there is. If it's someone you've known for a long time versus someone you just met, but maybe that doesn't matter. If I would say something to the effect of, there's been a lot of change lately, a lot of people leaving. Are you planning on leaving anytime soon? And they may not want to talk about it, which is certainly their right. But if you address it in a polite way, I think it should be generally well received.
Dr. Gillis, always great. Appreciate it. And we'll do it again next week. Thanks, pal.
Take care, my friend.
Bye-bye. All right. That's Dr. John Gillis, and that's House Calls. We do that each and every Wednesday from 11 until 12. Now we've got an open hour. What would you like to get into? A lot of potential topics, with it being budget day yesterday, and another bill tabled which would lift ban on fracking and uranium exploration. And what's happening, of course, continues to happen in Ottawa. What's happening in the United States with Trump. On and on it goes. What would you like to get into? And, of course, we can talk hockey and Sid Crosby. Got a couple of comments concerning Sid Crosby as well that I'd like to mention. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Coming off a pretty busy news morning and a news day yesterday and responding to it all with the budget front and center. But that's not all that's going on at the legislature, as the Houston government, with its two-thirds majority, is active as can be. Among all of the things going on, a pay raise, a hefty pay raise for MLAs. A 29% pay raise, as a matter of fact. Now, in fairness, MLAs have not received a pay raise since the early 2011, I believe it was. Could have been 2013. I think it's 2011. And they were not making nearly as much as their counterparts across the country. Now, I think this kind of puts them in the middle of the pack, if Minister Lohr was accurate. In he mentioned that earlier in the show. We kicked off the show with Minister Lohr. But nonetheless, a 29% pay raise, it's look, folks, it increases the annual payable, the pay to MLAs to $115,000 from $89,000. There have been other additional increases as well. The salary payable to the speaker up to $63,000. That's above and beyond the MLA pay, of course. From $49,000, there have been other increases as well. But the bottom line is the bottom line. A nearly 30% pay hike in one fell swoop, in my opinion, is eye-popping, and I'm not sure that how palatable it is for a lot of Nova Scotians out there who are struggling to get by and survive. And look, I have always said that I believe that remuneration for politicians should be decent, should be competitive. You're asking, in many cases, people to leave the private sector, in which, in not all cases, but in many cases, people had good jobs, careers, and there's risk to becoming an elected body. There's risk to being an MLA. You could get, your government could fall. You could not get reelected. There's public pressure. There's scrutiny. There's a lot of work to it, folks, that goes into this that people don't see. Now, I get it. Some MLAs, it's like some MPs, like some municipal councillors, are slack. Let's call it what it is. But I do believe the majority, and I would say the vast majority of them, work pretty hard for their money, and it's a tough job in most cases. That said, though, I'm not sure if a 29% pay raise is justifiable or not. What do you think about this? Are you okay with MLAs getting a 29% pay raise? Not a bad pay hike. I don't know anybody who gets pay raise of 29%. Only people I know that have gotten a pay raise like this. So that's one of the things that you can talk about. Of course, many, many other things you can get into. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. The Nova Scotia government, a bill will lift the ban on fracking and uranium exploration. Nova Scotia's government has put forward a bill that would lift blanket bans on the exploration of uranium and hydraulic fracking of fossil fuels, a move the Premier says will make the province more self-reliant in the face of potential U.S. tariffs. And not everybody agrees with this. Thomas Arneson McNeil, a senior energy coordinator with the Halifax-based Ecology Action Center, says he can't fathom how we could meet our gas emission reduction targets when moving in this direction. However, the Premier is adamant that it can be done safely and needs to be done. Natural Resources Department says it estimates there is 7 trillion cubic feet of recoverable natural gas potential in the province. With uranium, the department said it won't know how much is underground until the legislation is changed and research moves forward, adding the international demand for it continues to rise. Both resources are being mined safely in other jurisdictions within Canada, the Premier said. And he adds it could be done safely here as well. It's time for us to be adults about that. Do you agree with this? Do you agree with the Premier and this move that it's time to start utilizing and capitalizing on our natural resources? Because that's what's going on in the United States, folks. That's what Donald Trump, a lot of what he promotes and talks about, the prosperity of the United States is based on the development of natural resources and fossil fuels and oil extraction and gas extraction. Energy. Energy, energy, energy. It is so critical in all that we do. It has a ubiquitous nature in all our lives, of course. So do you support the government's move when it comes to the resource development, something that we have not done for many, many years here? And as mentioned, we've had a ban on fracking and still do have a ban on fracking until this bill gets passed. 902-405-6000. So what are your thoughts on that? Or whatever else you've got in your mind. Oh, and of course, hockey. I want to quickly mention something about Sidney Crosby. I mentioned yesterday, off the cuff, and probably inappropriately, said that Sidney Crosby, at 37 years old, should be the captain. I said I was supported that he's a captain. I said that he's a great contributor to the team, but I said that he's not the fastest and best player in the team at this point. And if you look at the comment on its face value, I was flat wrong. I was dead wrong. When you look at the statistics of the tournament, he's leading the tournament in scoring, clearly leading the team, clearly instrumental in having the team to where it is. So my apologies to Sid Crosby. Sid Crosby, you're still the best, bud. Bottom line. I'll eat my words any day. There you go, folks. I received a number of emails from people chastising me, and rightfully so, that I dare say that Sidney Crosby was no longer the best player on Team Canada. Clearly he is. The statistics show it. That all said, though, Connor McDavid, man, that guy can skate. What hands and what talent. Anyway, there you go. There's some love for Sid Crosby. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Give us a call. What is on your mind today? Nicole, hello.
Todd, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Oh, I'm good. I mean, I could dive into the budget stuff, but if we want to talk about like maybe the 30% increase, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to call out all of the MLAs that are quietly allowing the Department of Education to update the policy code of conduct for schools, remove sexual harassment and sexual abuse from the definitions that they determine are considered unacceptable behavior, remove sexual misconduct from the disciplinary matrix for elementary students. And now Brendan McGuire is saying, well, as of the 17th of, or around the 17th of January, he said it's going to go for another round of policy consults. And then by March, we're going to have something that can be enacted in the schools. Well, we're now, February 19th. Nothing has come back out. I can't find anything anywhere about the further consultative process. But what threw up major alarm bells for me was January 17th, I called into your show to outline exactly what they're doing with the policy code of conduct. Somewhere between January 17th and February 14th, I told people to go to the HRC website so that they can see exactly what documents HRCE, in participation with the Department of Education, put out that outlined everything I've just said. Somewhere between the 17th of January and the 14th of February, HRCE removed all that information. So now we seem to have a transparency issue around what's actually happening with this policy code of conduct. And much like I have said in previous calls, and much like I said last time when I was calling in about the mining, the question is, what are we watching happen? Why are they doing it? Why are these protections being removed from students, also from teachers, also from administrators? What's the greater impact of this? And how many years down the road are we going to have to wait before we have a what did we do moment because we didn't pay attention to it in the moment? I have some big questions.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Lots to talk about there. You're obviously very, very engaged, eh? You can tell that you're very passionate about what's going on here in the province.
I am, and I think I'll attribute it part of it to I've been off social media for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at Facebook. I don't look at Instagram. I rarely read the news, but what I do is I go directly to the source. I read media statements and I read legislation. And that is what I do, and that is how I govern myself, because it's important, because everyone's always going to come to you with a lens, right? But if you want to be a truly resilient person who can adapt to what is happening around you, you have to be able to step back and find a deep place of neutrality and be able to look at everything from a very neutral space and to be able to decharge that. And the fun thing about neutrality, you were in the military, were you not?
I was, yeah.
It's a principle of, it's a geopolitical principle. You're either a neutral or you're a belligerent. And you have to figure out who you're going to be in this game if you want to get anywhere or have any idea of what's actually happening. And you have to be able to identify that outside of yourself. So for me, it's always so important to just look at the information as it's coming out through their official communication departments, and not how it's being interpreted for me through other sources. And that's where I feel like I'm able to kind of cut through the noise very quickly and get to the meat of some issues. And even in the articles that I've read related to what Brendan Maguire is doing with the Education Act, and I will say the Policy Code of Conduct revision started under Becky Druin. And what I find most interesting right now is she's now the Attorney General. So even if we start looking at potential pushback on what this looks like, it's going to be a problem. And even now, Brad McGowan, who was appointed as the assistant to Brendan Maguire, he was the supervisor of schools prior to his post. So, and he was my MLA. He knocked at my door. We've had this conversation, and now everything's gone quiet. So I have a lot of questions because these are our children. Why in the province of Nova Scotia, when we have the history that we do related to sexual abuse in schools, why are we even considering removing these protections? And all I can see is that there's incompatibility with the curriculum that's being pushed forward.
Okay, Nicole. Appreciate the call. Got a boogie. Thanks for the call.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Linda says this. She says, Todd, don't think Sid Crosby cares at all what you think about him. Stop worrying. And you're absolutely right. He does not care. But his fans do care what I said about him. And that's who I'm speaking to. So the people who called me out on my stupid comment yesterday, I am giving you your credence. You're absolutely right. What I said was dumb. Sidney Crosby is still the best player on the ice. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. But you never know. Sidney Crosby might listen to the show. He's from Cole Harbour. Maybe he does it. Maybe he listens every day. You never know. Probably not, but hey, let's dream. Peter, hello.
Hello, how are you doing, Todd?
I'm well, you?
I'm good. My name is Peter. I'm a senior and fish harvester by trade, but I'm calling from rural Newfoundland and Labrador.
Okay.
And I'd just like to put my opinion on tariffs and the government under Justin Trudeau for the last, say, 5 years.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know, my opinion of Justin was he's probably one of the best people on earth. But when it comes to a prime minister, I think he has one of the worst. Our debt right now, the federal government is blamed on the pandemic, you know. But we can't forget the way he handled immigration, and that's a thing. And he tried to turn. 40 million people in Canada, he was trying to turn the world green, and Canada paid a big price for that by doing that. And, we need to be refining our own fuels and things like that, and we need to look, we're going to have some pollution too. And in order to, instead of shipping gas out of country, and then buying it back. I don't think that could make much sense to any voters. The only thing, Todd, that I think that, in my opinion, Mark Carney, he saved Canada Bank and Britain from recession, and hopefully, if we got a chance, if we got one, if we give him the mandate again, we give him the mandate to Prime Minister. I think he is probably the best chance we got in the upcoming election. The upcoming battle with recessions.
Yeah, but you don't. Some would suggest that Mark Carney has been too closely aligned with the Liberals and Liberal policy, including some of the policies that you just talked about. You don't feel that way?
If somebody was going to campaign, and they had a resume, and I feel politicians should have a resume, not just somebody come out as no disrespect to an elementary school teacher, because my daughter's one, but. And all of a sudden, they're the Prime Minister of Canada. I think people got to start voting, not the way your hair looks. And like Pierre Poilievre, he's not electable because he wears glasses, so he had to discontinue. But if people don't feel that way, that's okay too. But that's my opinion. And I've been a few years here on Earth, and I wish everybody come out and tell us. Most people campaign on their education, not on what they achieved. And I think Mark Carney has ever achieved a lot, both home here in Canada and abroad.
Yeah, Peter, I would disagree with you a bit. I think that inherently people are attracted to, or gravitate to certain elements, like physicality, like how somebody looks, how they present themselves, how they vocalize things. I mean, that's part of politics. That it's a sales job, right? And it's like anybody will tell you in the sales world that a lot of times it comes down to do you like the person or not, as to whether or not you'll buy something from somebody or not. And politics is for the many comparables to it's a sales job. So it does come down to personality.
Well, yes, I suppose you're right to a certain extent. But Todd, in all due respect to what you're saying. I'd rather have 7.5% sales tax, and I'd rather have take more to paycheck home, both for me and my family. I'd like to see the grandkids grow up in Newfoundland and Labrador and work here, and that's if they wanted to. Yeah. And a better Canada, and I think we're going to have to go with a resume to make that better. We're going to have to put politics to one side. And we're going to have to give the fellow with the best resume the better chance. Yeah. And if I might move on a second, if I got a
sure, yeah, go ahead.
Touch on tariffs and stuff like that. Now, all my vocabulary now and my grammar and everything is not up to par with some of those politicians. I am what I am, and that's why I call your show. I'm the constituent that's going to be voting, But with those tariffs and things like that, there was a writer, a book. I never read the book, but I do know that she did write a book. I believe it was Diane Francis in 2013. And in that book, if you want to read it, is everything, basically, that's happening right now between U.S. and Canada. And, Donald Trump, to me, you got to pay heed to him. When he came back and said he wanted to take Canada and things like that, it was a joke. But after knowing that she wrote a book and things like that, I knew it wasn't no joke. And in order down the road for the U.S. to survive with water and things like that and all the minerals and everything like that, they need Canada. And I figured in my own heart that he was 100%. And, at the tariffs, when the premiers went to Washington, and when they came back, our Premier Fiore, he told the truth to the constituents here that, they were serious about annexing Canada. But all our politicians around here now, they're going to go toe to toe with a trade war with the United States. The United States got 350 to 400 million people, if I'm correct, and we got 40 million people, and they go to toe with the United States. In my opinion, as an everyday common Joe, is about the same as taking a knife to a gunfight. You know, there is no comparison, and like to get ourselves like in this situation and boxed into one corner. You can't blame Liberal, you can't blame PC government or Progressive Conservative or whatever. You know, you got to blame them all, right? And politicians got to get down to the brass tacks. You take Doug Ford, you know, he's running provincially. You can't campaign on this, Doug, and I got a lot of respect for you. And Christopher Freeland, Jasmine Singh, Pierre Poilievre, you know, shut up. You're making me sick. You know, you've got to fix it. You just can't keep on misleading the people on what you're going to do.
Right. Okay, Peter, got a boogie. Thanks for the call, pal.
Anyway, I'd like to throw out one thing before I go.
Quickly.
I'm a Newfoundlander, a proud Canadian, but I say to the young people of Newfoundland and Labrador and Canada, are we saying no to the United States without hearing what they got to offer? Thanks, Todd.
Okay, thanks for the call, pal. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. John, hello.
Good day, Todd. How are you doing?
I'm well, you?
Not too bad. No, I would have to say no to the MLA raises. And you gave a good little case for them and whatnot. But, Todd, here's my case.
Okay.
Many of those MLAs, prior to becoming an MLA, have other things on the go. So it's not like they're dropping everything to become an MLA. They also don't need to have too many years under their belt when they can comfortably retire, unlike the rest of the population, with an indexed pension and God knows what other benefits. I also have never heard anyone come on any type of radio show and just lay it on the line. What is the total compensation package for an MLA? And I mean total. Car allowance, fuel allowance, clothing allowance, meal allowance, all up your pensions. So in the normal, regular world, all of those things are brought into one package. And if you don't like it, then you can refuse your job. And as some of your callers have brought up, most places where you work, if you don't perform, you do not get a raise. Okay, so that's my argument there. And this tariff thing, Todd, I listened to Ian Lee.
Yeah.
And the way Ian Lee describes the tariffs, it makes absolutely no sense why we would do counter tariffs other than to make up for lost funds. And those funds come from the Canadian public. Because according to Ian Lee, if we put tariffs on products, it's Canadian taxpayers pay.
Absolutely. The jurisdiction where the tariff applies is the taxpayer pays. Absolutely. That's 100%. You're 100% correct.
So where's the, you know what I'm saying? Where's that logic?
Yeah, I get it. It's tough to know. Ian Lee's basic philosophy is that when you're going up against somebody that's 10 times your size, economically, it's difficult to win that war. And why punish your own people with having to pay more? But I guess I don't know if it's a symbolic thing, perhaps. John, maybe it's symbolism. That could be when you're at war. And this is a war for all intents and purposes. It's economic warfare, and maybe symbolically, it's the point, perhaps.
Okay, good point. So we can't fight all battles all fronts at the same time. When this climate change thing, they got to really change their whole attitude about this. A previous caller said 40 million, 43, 44 million people cannot change the world. There was you had an environmental lawyer on, I think, the other week.
Eco justice, yeah.
Yeah, and he's all for everything that Trudeau's doing and not. And my question to him is, what bubble does he live in?
Yeah.
Because the climate is not subjected to one country or one continent.
Yeah.
What we do here in Canada is not going to make a hell of beans to what's happening in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, you're right.
U.S. And vice versa.
John, it comes back to the same thing, though, that I said about the counter tariffs, and some would say that it's about symbolism and it's about setting an example. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that would be the counter argument. That yes, we contribute as a nation less than 1% of total emissions, but by doing something, we're global leaders and we're showing that we care, and we're showing we're setting an example. I suppose you don't buy that. You don't support that.
No, I do not buy that, Todd, because the people that it does not affect are the people that are coming up with these policies. The people that it does affect are the ones that are living day to day. And here's something, Todd, and then I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
Taking up too much time. Prior to this Trudeau government coming into power, whether it was conservative, liberal, NDP, whatever. The message during their term would be, Canadians, you need to start saving for your future, for your retirement. That has never been said with the Trudeau government. You know why? Because you damn well can't afford to save anymore. Anyway, my friend, I'll let you go.
Okay. All right, pal. Take care. Have a good one.
But enjoy the sunshine.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. Stephen, hello.
Oh, hello, Todd, the man who plays 4 or 5 strings on something.
That's right.
I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm all for the MLA pay increase now. I'll temper that. Like you said, it's been 2011 since they got an increase.
Yeah.
And if you look at that over the number of years, when you look at the amount of money, it's 1% per year. And had they done that back in 2011 and said, we're just going to give you 1% per year, it would have not has been as shocking. But I believe completely that MLAs are underpaid for what they do.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion. I look at our municipal councillors who are making more than MLAs. Now, could they have brought that in over a 4-year period at 25% per year? That probably would have been a little bit easier to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
But my generalized opinion is everyone else has gotten pay raises over the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't. So, why are we bitching about it?
Yeah, look, I agree. I understand what you're saying. I do. I totally get what you're saying. I think it's just, what it comes down to, Steve, is that it's people see 29% pay raise, and that's the headline that they see. They don't, and I'm not criticizing anybody when I say this, but most people don't read the fine print or won't read the story and say, oh, they haven't received a pay raise since 2011. And it's the headline that grabs people's attention. And people in this day and age, in which people are struggling and often getting less than 2% raise, lucky to have a job. In some cases, many cases, people make a minimum wage, and they see 29%, and then they see that they're now making $115,000 a year, and people just shrug their shoulders and say, "This is not right." But what you're saying is, I agree with what you're saying. But I guess my point is, Steve, is that I can relate to and understand why when people see the headline, they react the way that they do.
100%, absolutely, 100%. It's a shocking number, but had they been a little bit more conscious and done it gently, we wouldn't be seeing the shocking number.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and look, and that's and that is part of the whole political game. The reason why they haven't had pay raises is because of politics, right? Because politically, it was considered to show solidarity, to show that they're not in it for the money or whatever. And back in 2011, $89,000 was good money, and so listen. I think that there should be a system in place in which pay raises are scheduled yearly at 1 or 2% or 2 or 3% or whatever is justified, and then we won't have this foolishness. I think that moving forward.
That I completely agree with.
Yeah.
Graduated pay increases. Politicians, I would never go into politics. That is a thankless job.
Yeah, for sure.
But you know what? You need to pay people. For the thankless job that they do, because people are phoning them at 2:00 in the morning, complaining about why are my roads not cleared or plowed or salted or whatever. So yeah, I think they earn their money, but yeah, I agree with you completely, in that there should be a graduated system that goes in there. And final note before I let you go, because I know you got to get on to other folks. You're not wrong on Sid.
Well, look, he's the highest point getter in the tournament to this point, and I'm reading some stories from some of the players that are just basically in awe of what the guy can still do out there. So I guess, Steve, I'm willing to walk back what I said. What I do stand by this though is that Nathan MacKinnon. There is not a more explosive hockey player on planet Earth than that guy, and what an exciting phenom to watch play hockey.
Yeah, Nate or Connor.
Yeah, that's right.
Either of them are fantastic, but yeah, I don't think you should walk back on that. To be honest with you, Todd.
I don't mind. It's all Steve. It's just having a little bit of fun with it. To be honest with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway. You have a great day, great week. Hopefully you're not sliding down your driveway.
Okay, pal. Take care. All right.
Sure,
all right. Listen, I'm having a little bit of fun with the Sidney Crosby thing. When all is said and done, folks, it's just a game. It's just hockey. It's not life or death, okay? We talk about very serious issues on the show, and if Crosby's the best player on the ice or not is not really one of them as far as I'm concerned. Just having a little bit of fun with it. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. We've got a couple of first-time callers, so we're going to listen to a couple of the first-time callers. Let's talk to Ann. Ann, go ahead.
Hi there, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
Good. I just wanted to make a quick comment. Why can't the politicians and MLAs and everybody involved with the government work like regular people? They always get summers off, Christmas, whatever. They get time off like teachers do. Why don't they just work all year round and get stuff done?
Well, some would say that they do work all year round and don't have much time off at all. You don't believe that?
No. There's always a break, especially in Parliament. There's always a summer break. We can't get anything done. Let them sit and get things done, and don't take those big breaks.
Okay.
I know they probably work long hours. I agree with that, but still, they're getting paid now a lot of money, so I think they need to work all year round and take their 3 or 4 weeks off that they're allowed, like everybody else has to do in Nova Scotia.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for the call. Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. Steve's the first-time caller as well. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm just thinking in terms of was it the Premier that was mentioning about wanting to do uranium type of fracking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what happened with some of those scenarios where fracking took place, there were a few dramatic issues that resulted, which can happen in virtually any industry. But I think activists pretty much got on board with some of the negative aspects of it. But for the most part, it's actually can be done quite safely. So I think it's actually a good enterprise. Not to mention that, this province really needs a lot of help in terms of any kind of industry or mining or anything. I mean, we all agree that we need jobs and we need to support the government and all the other aspects of trying to run at least a province in this case. So
you're a supporter of it, obviously, of extraction and exploration of natural resources.
Yeah, any natural resource. I actually agree with Trump. I don't agree with Trump on everything, but in terms of drilling, what the very aspect of mining and drilling and so on has brought the first world. We've been brought out into the first world as a result of that kind of industry.
Yeah.
And that's why we're now a first world country, is because we've endeavored in all kinds of enterprises across the world, and what that has done to energy cheap. And so now when you have cheap energy, all of a sudden you have a wealthier country who can actually pay more attention to things like technology and then, be careful about how we go about creating our industries and being more conscientious of the planet. I mean, the wealthier a country becomes, the more conscientious they become of pollution. If everybody's so worried about pollution, and I understand that the first world, we often we tend to mock ourselves because one aspect of becoming wealthier is we've become crazy in terms of consumption, but we can always control our consumption and then but make energy.
But Steve, listen, it's human nature though. If energy is abundant and it's cheap, we don't curb our consumption. That's not accurate as far as I'm concerned. I think it's just the opposite. I think the more abundant energy is and the less expensive it is, I think that I think it's pretty evident that the more we will consume. I think we've proven that as a human race, have we not?
So you're saying, we suppress our economy because
no, you made it, Steve. You made a statement. I'll put all the caution aside. You said that when energy is abundant and it's there, we become conscious and use less of it. I say that our track record doesn't play out. That when energy is abundant and it's less expensive, that we use more of it. I do believe that.
Yeah, I guess there's no question some of what you're saying is true. Obviously, we can be very negligent that way, but I think now that we sort of awaken to, that we're more aware when pollution takes place, when any type of
that's true. I get it. We're aware, but here's the thing, Steve. If gas pumps were free and you could drive any vehicle you wanted, and you would probably do a lot more traveling if gas was free and you had a vehicle at your disposal. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, no. I would admit to that. I probably would. Yeah.
Right.
But if I knew, but at the same time, that same issue can be resolved by the wealthier you are, the more you're likely to build better technology so that you don't, result in more.
Well, what are we doing? We're not developing other technologies. As a matter of fact, and I'm not criticizing this, by the way. I'm just observing this. We're reverting back to drill, and back to the land and back to this finite resource. So
our cars are much more
energy efficient. They are. Yeah.
Yeah, energy as well. In other words, the amount of consumption, but also in the emissions, the output of what's happening. Cars are, I'm going to say, at least 4 or 5 times more, have better emission control than they did 10, 15 years
absolutely.
ago. I know that because I was in the trade.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, Steve, listen, thanks for the call. Call again, okay?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, take care. Quentin, you got to be quick, like 30 seconds or less. I wanted to get you on, though. Go ahead.
Yeah, just want to say Team Canada tomorrow night. Let's make sure that our boys win. The American coach has been bad-mouthing our team here in the last 24 hours and bad-mouthing our country.
Oh, this is Clinton, not Quentin. Sorry, Clinton, yeah.
Yeah. So everybody tune into that game and let's send some positive vibes to Team Canada. We got to win this one.
Okay, Clinton. Thanks, buddy.
No worries.
All right, take care. Thanks to everybody for the calls. We appreciate it. Thanks to Vanessa Van Ness as well. On the other side of the glass, the control board's doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.